Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial. My name is Dennis and let's check out our project for today. So for this tutorial, I will be showing you how to recreate this stylized animation that I put together, and it's going to be divided into two parts. The first part, I will show you how to create this type of render in Cinema 4D with Octane. Then we're going to bring this into After Effects and composite it onto all these elements that we're going to design inside of After Effects, like the floor and these callouts. So it's going to be fun, and let's just jump right into it. Okay, so here we are in Cinema, and here I have imported a model that I purchased for another project. You can pretty much use any model for this. The technique should be just fine. And with this model, it came with all these default materials, which we're not going to be using since we're going to create our own. And a quick way to override all these materials without deleting them from the model would be I will select everything by hitting Ctrl A and group it into a null. Then I'm going to create a connect object, and I'm going to uncheck weld and textures and then reference the null that we just made. Now if I make a new material and apply it to the connect object, we should be able to override the model like this. So let's delete that and let's create a plane. So this is going to be our floor. I'm going to scale it up and move it down a little bit. And let's frame our shot in our scene, and let's create a camera. Let's look through the camera and also create a null. Then parent the camera to the null. Now we can just animate the rotation to create our camera animation. So let's do that. But first, let me add a protection tag to the camera so I don't move it anymore or accidentally move it in the scene. And let me open up my render settings real quick. So I will be using 720p at 24 frames per second. A total of 120 frames for this project. So let's go to frame 0 or from in the beginning, and let's keyframe this. Let's move to the end and let's keyframe. Now let's play it back. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So that's our basic setup, and I think we're ready to move on to the rendering aspect of it. So let's fire up Octane. And when I'm using Octane, I have a custom layout that I like to use. So I'm going to load that up. Takes a second. Here we go. For the render settings for Octane, I'm pretty much going to just use the default settings here. And the only thing I'm going to check is probably this adaptive sampling. I think this just makes the rendering a little faster when we render the sequence later. So let's load this into our scene, and here it is. And also I usually lock the aspect ratio here, just so that I see exactly how big my render is as I'm working. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to create an environment, and instead of using a HDR image, I'm just going to use a color, and let's make it black. Next, let's create a Octane material for the car, and another one for the floor. So, and let's make both of these black as well. Let me apply the car to the car. I should rename this as the car, and the floor to the plane, which let's rename this as the floor. Okay, so when I'm doing materials in Octane, I like to use the node editor because it makes it easy to see where everything is connected. So let's add a black body emission and connect that to the emission. And let's go in here, and I'm going to check surface brightness and uncheck normalized, and we can play with the power here. Next, I'm going to add a dirt node here and connect it to my texture in the black body. I'm going to invert the normals, and I'm going to play with some of these settings right here. So the dirt node kind of act like a almost like a ambient occlusion, and by playing with the power, we get a good idea what this looks like. But I'm also going to add a invert node right between here. I just click and drag and just drop it, and you should pipe it in right just like that. And again, it's all about kind of just like tweaking these settings here. So I think that looks pretty good. Maybe increase the power a little bit. And real quick, I'm gonna go to my floor material and change it from a diffuse to a glossy, so that we see a reflection. And maybe I increase the roughness a little bit, so now we have a blurry reflection. Okay. Another thing you can do is you can add a gradient node right here, and this almost kind of acts like a levels effect, but you can clamp this in. But what I'm going to use it for is I'm just going to change the color of the white here to maybe like a bluish tint. There we go. And so now we have this one part right here. I can also add a fall off node, and let's just pipe that into the texture for now. And similarly, you can play with the settings here, the skew factor, and also add a gradient node right here. And this, we can also change the color to something a little darker. Something like that. Maybe a little less saturated. And then with these two nodes, I can combine them using a add node. So let's pipe this into texture 2, texture 1, and then pipe that in. So that's looking pretty good. So that's the basic setup we have. And once again, when you're playing with this, you can spend a lot of time tweaking all these values between the power of your emission, right? And these the radius and whatnot. But I think I'm let's see. I think I'm pretty good with this. So let me add a Octane camera tag to my camera. And in the tag, you can enable camera imager, and this gives you a lot of different ways to tweak it. So you have access to exposure, gamma, saturation, all this stuff. And there's this, you have these options for these color curves, and you can like play with them to give some cool effects. But normally I just make it linear, and then maybe increase the exposure and gamma a little bit. And you also have the option to activate the post-processing, which allows you to add some bloom into this. It's very cool, but normally I just leave this off because I like to do all the glows and stuff in post in After Effects. I find that just gives me a little more flexibility. Let's see. Okay, make this a little darker. And okay, I think I'm good with this. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna make this a little darker. Let's see. Okay, cool. I think we're good with this. And oh yeah, one more thing. Under camera imager, there's a AI denoiser. I'm going to enable that. That just makes your renders a little more smoother. You would just take out a lot of the grain, especially in the reflections and whatnot. which is very cool. So that's the basic setup, and again, you can spend all day tweaking this, but I think we're good for now. So let me go ahead and render out the sequence. So I will be open up render settings. Let's go render all frames. Make sure that I'm rendering with Octane. Let's go under Octane and check use the denoise path, and let's save it somewhere. So let's make a new folder called Audi tutorial beauty pass. Oops. And let's just use a JPEG for this. And yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I think we're set up here, and I'm going to render to picture viewer. And it's going to take a second to render, and I'm going to pause this, and we'll be back when this is done. Okay, we're back, and let's take a look at our render. Looks pretty good, and the whole thing took about 9 minutes, so that's really good. Now, before I jump into After Effects, there are a couple more things I want to do. I want to create a matte for the car itself so that we can separate that in post. And also, I want to add some reference nulls in the scene so that we can position our callouts later. So let's go ahead and do that. I know that Octane has its own multipass system, but I normally just prefer to use the standard multipass from Cinema 4D, so let's do that. And since we're not going to be using Octane anymore, let me change the layout back to the startup layout, and also make sure I enable the multipass right here. I'm going to use a object buffer 1, and I'm going to add a compositing tag to my car and enable object buffer 1. And just for a test real quick, let me just render this to picture viewer, and under your layers you can see that we have our object buffer here. Okay, now let me just add some nulls here, and I'm gonna call this my callout 1, and let's change this to a rectangle and orientation to XY. Bring this out here. How come I'm not seeing it? Oh, there it is. It's too small. Okay, so let me just position that quickly in the scene. And this you can just kind of like do it. Doesn't have to be very specific. I'm gonna duplicate this, move it back here. Maybe it's gonna be somewhere here. Let's duplicate this again. Let's move it back. Somewhere back here should be fine. Okay. And let's do one more. Position that somewhere here. And without these, I'm going to select all and add a external compositing tag, and this will allows us when we export this, it will come into After Effects as a null. I'm also going to add external compositing tag to the floor itself. Oops, not a compositing tag. External compositing tag. There you go. Okay, so now we're ready to. Well, at first, let's render out the matte. So let me save out the multipass. Let's use a JPEG as well, and let's find a place to render. So call it Audi tutorial matte. Okay, let's output all frames. Let's render. So this should be fairly quick, but I'm going to pause this as it renders. Okay, we're done, and let's take a look at our sequence. Perfect. And one more, so the last thing we want to do is to export a AEC file for After Effects. So let's save that file. Save. Okay, now we can jump into After Effects, and let me just create a folder for these guys. Let's be my old stuff. And let's just import that AEC file that we just saved out right here. And that's going to bring in our comp with all our nulls as well as our passes. So everything should line up perfectly. And I'm just going to rename this folder as my render folder, and this will be my comp just for some organization. And let's import the beauty pass we also rendered. So it will be this. Drop that in. Perfect. So as you can see, everything lines up perfectly. And I'm gonna just hide these nulls right now, just because I don't need to see them. Okay, so let's start compositing. But well, actually, the first thing we want to do is let's design some of the elements here. So I'm gonna create a new comp, and 1920 by 1080 24. Okay, that's fine. So let's do our callouts first. So this is my callout comp, and there are a lot of ways to do callouts in After Effects. I will just show you the way I did it, and I think it's pretty useful. So let's create a null and duplicate that. I'm going to call this my A, and this is going to be B. So these are going to be my control points that we're going to use. And let's first create a target. So to do that, I'm gonna go here, select the circle tool, double click. It's gonna create a shape layer, and let's just open up its contents, and let's make the size, say 150 by 150. Lock it so that it's a perfect circle. We don't need the stroke here, and let's just animate the size from 0 to 150. So maybe 10 frames in, 150. Go back here, put 0. And then let's select both of these, hit F9 to make it easy ease, and open up the graph editor. And under the speed curve here that I'm using, let's just drag these handles back so that this will make it kind of a snappy, kind of snap and then ease in, which is perfect. Okay, let's duplicate this layer and open up the settings again. And instead of fill, let's use stroke and make the circle a little bigger. And under the stroke, we can play with this width here as well. Okay, something like that. And maybe I'll duplicate this one more time. So at this point, we're kind of just like playing around. You can design it however you want. I might make the opacity of the second one lower, but make the stroke a little thicker, something like that, and maybe make the sides a little bigger, so it's kind of like here. Okay, cool. And another thing you can do, just for design purposes, for my second stroke here, I can add a let's see, I can add a trim path, and if you play with the settings, you would just kind of like do a little trimming here. And you can also just animate or put a expression on the rotation here. So let's add a wiggle expression. Let's say 360. Okay. So now we just kind of like randomly rotate, which is perfect. Okay. Let's take our 3 layers and kind of offset them a little bit. Okay, I think that's good. So I'm going to select all these 3 layers and pre-compose them and call it my target. And let's open up the position of my nulls and my target, and I'm going to parent, well, not parent, I'll click the position and just pick whip to position of A. So now if I move A, it would just, the the target will just follow it wherever it goes. And we can scale that down, something like that. Okay, cool. Now let's create a line that connects both of these points. To do that, I'm going to create a solid, call it my line, and I'm going to apply the beam effect. Let's make the length 100%, and let's make both of these white, inside and outside color, and turn down the softness to 0. So I want to again point the starting position here and the end position here. So let's pick whip the starting position, or I'll click and then connect it to A, and I'll click the end position and connect it to A again. Oh, actually no, connect it to B. Sorry, delete this. Let's do that again. Connect it to B, semicolon. Okay, cool. Now we have our line, and if we move B, everything will track. And for this, we can just animate the time here from 0 to 50. So let's do that. 0, let's go 10 frames. Oops. 0 to 50. Let's play this back. What the? Oh my god, okay. Let's do that again. 0 to 50. Hit U. Okay, cool. Let me just save this real quick. And let's move both of these down. Cool. So for the next part, I'm gonna go create a rectangle tool. Double click. I'm gonna create another shape layer, and let's open up its content. And let's make the size quite a bit smaller. And let's unlock this, and let's just make it like, say, 150 by 100. Maybe like 200 by 100. For now, we don't need the stroke. Let's open up the fill here. There's a transform. Okay, so I want to do a couple things. I'm going to use some expressions to make this shape layer a little easy to work with. First thing I want to do is, well, the first thing, let's just link it to the B position. So again, I'll click the position of the layer and pick whip it to position of the B node. So now it goes with it. Okay. And instead of going here and then adjusting these values, let's just create a slider control. I'm going to call this my X. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this my Y. And let's alt click our size here. And then I'm going to say X equals this guy. Y equals this guy. And then square bracket XY. Now we can just play with these values here. Okay. Let's also do the same thing for let's create another one for the opacity. And once again, I'll click, pick whip the opacity, semicolon. So now we can control the opacity here. This just makes it easier to instead of digging through all these lines here, we can just change it up here. Okay. Now, as you can see, right now the anchor point is right at the center. So whenever I change this, it would just go on both sides. So I want the anchor point to be on the bottom left corner here, and you can control the anchor point right here. So to do that, you can see that the anchor point is always half of the size, so half of x and half of y, right? Because it's right at the center. So let's just make a alt click. So I will say x equals size of x, y equals size of y, and square bracket x minus 2, or divide by 2, half on y, divide by 2. So now, okay, oh, we gotta go -2 for the x because it's on the other side. Cool. So now we can animate this. You would just come from that point right there. And I want to do one more expression, so let's add another slider control, and let's call this my x offset. Duplicate this, my y offset, and I'm gonna parent, or not parent, add expression to the position of the rectangle. And again, I will say x equals the slider here, y equals slider here, square bracket xy. Cool. So now I have the option to offset this as well. So the reason I set it up like this is because now it's really easy for me to design with this. So let's make the line something like that, a little thick line here. Okay, and we can just animate one more time the slider. Hit U and make this 0. So when it comes here, it comes out. And once again, let's hit F9, make it easy ease, and then drag it back. Let's see. Cool. Now let's duplicate this shape layer. Bring this out, maybe offset it, and let's offset the X to here a little bit, and we can make this a little longer. So as you can see, this makes it, because the way I set it up, makes it really easy to kind of like fix things, and everything's linked together. Okay, let's do another one. Hold up. I live by an airport, so there's always airplanes flying over my head, so I had to pause that and let the plane pass. Okay, cool. Let's duplicate the shape layer again, and let's move it, the offset back to 0, and move it up, and make this a little thicker, a little longer like this, and turn down the opacity. Right. So as you can see, this makes design really easy. And okay, cool. So for this one, what I want to do here is actually, let's bring this back. Maybe I start like this. And let's animate the opacity. So let's hit U, move down a frame. Let's make it 0. Let's copy paste, and copy. So we'll do a little flickering right in the beginning, and now we can animate the slider to something like that. Let's hit U again to bring this up. F9. Bring this back. Okay. Let's take a look. Cool. And again, we can just offset this back and forth. Okay, cool. So, you can just keep going and do more design factors. In fact, the shape layer is really cool. It has a lot of really cool options that I haven't even got into. You have a skew factor here, So if you want to do some more cool designs like that as well, and you will do the exact same thing that we were doing for linking them into like a slider expression to make it easier to control. But anyways, I think I'm good with this. Let's add some text. I'm going to be using Lorem Ipsum. These are just like fake words that looks like English, but for this mockup it should be fine. So let's just grab a word here, grab our text tool, and let's drag it down. Let's make that black, and let's scale this up. Not that big. You know what, for this layer, let me just make it a little thicker. Yep. Cool. Let me change the color to, let's say, a red. And I'm just going to parent it to the B now. Oops. And if you go into your effects and type in decoder, this is a default text animation that comes with After Effects that I like to use all the time. So it just creates a text animation animated in, let's see. Okay, cool. Let's make that real quick. Nice. Let's duplicate this, bring it to the bottom, and let's just copy a bunch of these lines here as well. Paste it, and let's make the scale way smaller, and maybe change the color to, let's say, white. Oops. And maybe turn down the opacity as well. And let's just do some design factors here. Since these are fake words, so we can do whatever. And maybe we can scale this. Cool. Let's see. Let's play this back. So yeah, so that's just a quick call out design that we can do. And we have our controls here, so we can easily move them as well. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to our comp and let's start adding stuff. So we have our object buffer here. I'm just going to bring it to the top and hide it. I'm going to duplicate my render pass, my render, and I'm going to hit set matte. I'm going to add this. Let's reference our object buffer 1, make it luminous. Now if I isolate this, I separate the car from the floor, which is cool. And so for the floor, if I add like a levels effect, I can boost the reflections a little more. Okay. Now let's add a grid to the floor. And the way I did it is I actually used a free preset from Dark Pause Motion Design. So I'll have a link in the descriptions, but it's a really cool effect. So it's called UI Grids, and this is just a really cool effect to build some really cool grids. There's a lot of different options you can do here. You have the size here, you have your divisions, right? And this is a shape layer, so it's sweet. And you have lines, dots, right? You can add crosses and squares. So this is awesome. It gives you a lot of options to do some really fancy looking grids, but let me just make my line opacity say like 10. I'm gonna make my dots, make the size quite small, like say 3, maybe 4. Let's add a, see, you can add a subdivision to my lines. And maybe for my squares, like let's enable that. You can enable the stroke function. So I'll turn down the fill, make the width like really small. Opacity, make it 10. And let's make the size of it, let's say 10 or maybe 20. Cool. So very quickly we can design a very fancy grid. Let's turn this layer into 3D. Let's open up the position and rotation of my floor, and let's just copy the position here to the shape layer and rotate this like 90 degrees, and let's drop that beneath our car. Cool. And because it's a shape layer, you can just like scale it and it would maintain its crispiness. Is that a word? It's because it's a vector. Okay. And again, I can add a secondary subdivision here. Nice. And on top of this, I can add a black solid. Let's turn this up real quick and just mask off the top part here with a mask. And let's feather it. And maybe I'll make these dots a little smaller. Let's see. Make it 2. Okay, and maybe I can make this line width a little smaller too, like 0.5. Line thickness 0.5. Nice. Okay, so we have our floor here. Now let's add the callouts we just made. And in the example, right, I had one callout coming down here, and the one we design is this one here. So let's make one that goes down like this and one that goes back like this. So let's call that callout 1. Let's call our callout 1. Let's duplicate this. Let's be our callout 2, and because we set it up like the way we did, it's really easy to just move it down like that. And for both of these lines, let's make it down a little, say 12. Okay. And we can even add a different word, but for this example, I'll just keep it as it is. Let's do callout 3. We'll duplicate it, and this one's a little more work because everything is the opposite, but we can easily reverse that by opening up the scale here and just hit negative 100%. So now this should be going the other way. And for the words too, let's just move it here. And actually for this one, let me go into my paragraph and justify the other way around. Okay. Oh, you know what? For this guy right here, let me just open up the my range selector, advanced. Let me make the mode subtract and reverse these keyframes. So it comes out like that. Cool. Alright, let's drop these in. So column number 1 is really big. Let's just scale that down, say like a 50 for now. And let's turn out my callouts here. Actually, we don't need that. So the way to do this is, because these nodes are actually a 3D nodes, have the positions as X, Y, and Z, and my callouts is only in 2D. So the way to link them together is with a little cheat expression that I have here with me. So let's just do it. I'm gonna turn on position. I'm gonna alt click, and we'll say X, or X, which is just a variable, equals, let's say, let's bring to the, I can pick whip the layer I want to change it to. No, sorry. Okay, then X dot to comp transform dot anchor point. There you go. Oh, and you want to make sure that your anchor point is where the target is. So first of all, let's scale this down, and let's just move it here. Well, it looks like I have the wrong now. I want to be this one. So which one is this? This is this top one right here. Okay, so let's open up the expression again. Let's delete this and pick whip that first layer. There we go. Okay, let's duplicate this null. Open up this expression, and we're going to replace it with callout 3. And once again, I want to make sure that the the anchor point is where the target is, like that. So open up this expression, and let's see. Okay, so we want to use these two. So let's delete this here and just pick whip to one of these guys. Cool. Let's duplicate this again. Same thing. I'm going to delete this layer and pick whip to this guy. And finally, let's duplicate that again for callout number 2. Swap that in. And again, make sure our anchor point is where the target is. Okay. And we want to connect it to this null, which is this guy right here. So bring up our expression, you can delete that, and pick whip to this guy. Cool. And the way we set it up, it's very easy to go in here and make changes as well. So if I want to make this go down a little farther, you can. Right, and because everything's linked to the null, we can even move it. Everything should track perfectly. So maybe for this, let's scale this down even more. Let's give it a little more variation. And we can offset these guys when they come in. So just do a little offset. Okay, cool. Let me just do a run preview of this real quick. I should pause this as it run preview. Okay. It's done run preview. Let's take a look. Nice, nice. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the way to do this. And if you want to add some style points, we can add adjustment layer. I call this my color correction layer, and we can just add some glows in, maybe like the curves. And let's do some color correction. Play with some of these color curves here, maybe red. Bring that down. Oops, make it blue a little more. Less. You can add a glow to the whole thing. Play with it. And there's so many things you can do. So if we have this layer by itself, if you don't like the color, you can you can change the color on this individually. So you can just use a tint. Maybe make it red instead. Pretty cool, huh? Or super blue, or super green, right? So many options, but that's pretty much it. Yep, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you. I will see you next time.